The world was quick to place the blame on nature when the wildfires swept through Los Angeles. What Barron Trump found was much more sinister, however. Los Angeles had itself besieged early in January 2025, when relentless wildfires ripped across the region, fueled by the fierce Santa Ana winds, burning huge sections of land in their wake. More than 10,000 buildings were consumed by flames and at least 11 people were killed as more than 180,000 people evacuated their homes. The Trump family had left for California on a series of engagements. Now 18, Barron Trump is a freshman at New York University and went with his parents. While his father, President Donald Trump, was at a fundraiser in the Los Angeles area, Barron had some time to explore the city. As the wildfires grew in intensity, the air in the city became thick with smoke, casting an eerie orange hue over the skyline. Barron, interested in the unfolding disaster, began to follow news reports and social media updates closely. He points out that, in places such as Pacific Palisades, multi-million-dollar homes were reduced to rubble, and the historical Rogers Ranch was lost to the flames. Still, something didn't seem right, an anomalous pattern in where the fires had started. While most people were talking about the sheer scale of the disaster, Barron noticed that the ignition points seemed to align in a peculiar trajectory, almost as if following a deliberate path. This observation sparked his curiosity, compelling him to delve deeper into the available data and reports. He began by mapping the reported ignition sites using public information from news outlets and official fire department releases. The more he plotted, the clearer was the pattern emerging. The fires seemed to begin in a succession that could imply more than pure random chance or some other effect of nature. Barron presented this information to his parents, and they, as engrossed in their promises, encouraged his inquisitive spirit but urged discretion. Undeterred, he called local authorities and fire experts, hoping to share his observations and gain further insight. However, his inquiries were met with skepticism. Officials, overwhelmed with managing the crisis, had little time to entertain theories from an 18-year-old, regardless of his background. Some dismissed his observations as mere coincidences, while others assured him that the professionals were handling the situation. Despite the dismissals, Barron's conviction grew stronger. He could not shake the feeling that there was a deliberate hand behind the disaster. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to investigate further on his own, unaware of the dangers and challenges that lay ahead. As Barron delved deeper into the mystery, he found himself entangled in a web of secrets that some would go to great lengths to keep hidden. The destruction caused by the wildfires was one of its scale that none had seen in Los Angeles for quite some time. Entire neighborhoods were mere smoldering ruins, and daylight became a pale, apocalyptic haze, covered in thick smoke. Emergency shelters overflowed with dislodged families recounting harrowing escapes from the advancing flames. Areas such as Malibu and Calabasas, which once stood as symbols of affluence and security in luxury estates, now resembled nothing but piles of ash and rubble. The streets were eerily silent except for the hum of fire trucks and helicopters dropping water on the infernos. Wildlife suffered a lot, too, with thousands of acres of habitat destroyed and animals fleeing to suburban backyards in desperation. For the residents, it felt hopeless. The fires, blown by gusts that topped 60 miles per hour, were spreading faster than containment efforts could keep up. Firefighters, already exhausted from battling previous blazes, worked around the clock. Images of them collapsing from sheer exhaustion became symbolic of the human cost behind the heroic efforts to control the fires. Barron, meanwhile, was deeply affected by the stories he encountered. Upon his visit to an evacuation center in Santa Monica, he heard how a tearful mother described being only just in time to take her children out as the fire engulfed their home. Another man showed Barron a photo of his prized vintage car collection, now just a pile of scorched metal. But what stuck with Barron most was a firefighter's story about the odd timing and locations of the fires. "It's almost like they've got a mind of their own," the man said, shaking his head. "I've been fighting fires for 20 years and have never seen anything like it. Some of these fires appear to just break out of the blue, in seemingly impossible locations," he said. These words strengthened Barron's opinion that something more significant was at work than mere accidents. He began to reminisce about the seemingly unusual ignition sites he had found earlier. Determined to find out more, he spent countless hours scouring online forums and social media and came across the posts of people who had, too, reported unusual fire behavior. Some concluded that the fires had been the product of arsonists, while other more sinister theories came up, involving corporate sabotage or forced land expropriation as part of land grabs. The one thread on this caught Barron's attention. The person uploading the video claimed to have had a drone taking footage of a region just outside Pasadena when suddenly, moments before the fire ignited, an apparent initial spark showed what looked like an object falling from the sky. The video, grainy and blurred, was sufficient to get Barron's heart racing. He saved it, wondering if that was all the evidence he would need to support the growing suspicion within him. But the more Barron uncovered, the more perilous the questions grew, dragging him into a maze of uncertainty from which there seemed to be no clear exit. When night had begun to fall over Los Angeles, Barron sat in his hotel room with the light of his laptop glowing through the dim air. His desk was covered with hastily scrawled notes, screenshots of social media posts, and a rough map of the spread of the wildfire. He sat intently watching the drone footage he downloaded hours earlier, replaying it frame by frame. The object in question, a small, bright flare, appeared for only a split second before disappearing into the brush. Moments later, the flames erupted. It was eerie. While many wildfires are started by lightning, faulty power lines, or carelessness, this footage hinted at something unnatural. Barron cross-referenced footage with news articles and fire department updates, marking ignition points on his map. Every dot aligned in the most disturbing precision, creating a path that ran from rural areas deep into densely populated neighborhoods. This just nurtured Barron's curiosity into an obsession. He delved deep into public records to trace recent land purchases in fire-affected areas. A pattern emerged: properties in high-risk zones had been quietly acquired by a handful of corporations in the months leading up to the fires. Barron noted the names of the companies, most of which were shell entities with little information available online. The deeper he dug, the more questions arose. One corporation in particular caught his attention: Sol Vista Holdings. The company's name had surfaced in recent transactions of properties that had been destroyed by the fires. What was unusual, however, was that the purchases were at inflated prices, an odd move for areas prone to natural disasters. Barron felt the weight of what he was uncovering. He called his older sister, Ivanka, to share his findings. "It just doesn't add up," he explained. "Why pay millions of dollars for land in fire zones unless they know something we do not?" Ivanka listened carefully, but was wary. "Barron, this sounds serious, but be careful. If you're right, this could get real high people exposed." Her warning made him all the more determined to investigate. The next day, Barron took a drive to one of the areas hit. He wanted to see for himself. What he discovered left him shaken. Amid the charred remains of homes and businesses stood signs of anomalies. A line of trees stood, untouched, in one neighborhood, while houses surrounding them were reduced to ashes. In another, a concrete wall bore scorch marks on one side but was mysteriously clean on the other. Barron photographed everything. He catalogued each detail meticulously, but as he walked through the ruins, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A black SUV idled at the edge of the street, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. It didn't belong to any emergency responders, of that he was certain. Ignoring the unease, Barron continued his documentation, determined not to let fear deter him. He uploaded his research to a secure cloud drive and made sure to back up everything. Later that night, he posted his findings to the private forum, hoping to reach out to others who may have noticed similar anomalies. Throughout the night, responses started coming in almost immediately. Some users thanked him for calling attention to the anomalies, others recounted similar situations in various parts of California. But one response stuck out, an enigmatic one that read, "You're closer to the truth than you think. Be careful who you trust." Barron did not know it yet, but his investigation was now starting to draw the attention of people not friendly at all. The mysterious message stayed in Barron's mind as he spent that night alone in his room. The flicker of excitement he'd felt earlier now gave way to an uneasy awareness of how high the stakes could be. He reviewed his findings again, noting how each piece of evidence pointed to something deliberate, something orchestrated. But by whom and why? Those questions loomed over him like shadows he couldn't escape. The next morning, Barron decided to take his investigation offline, thinking that his digital trail might already have been compromised. With a burner phone and a notebook, he went out to interview local residents in some of the hardest-hit areas. He started in Agora Hills, where several homes had been destroyed. Many evacuees were still camped out at temporary shelters, surviving on donated supplies and waiting for word about their properties. Barron approached an older man named Jack, who sat on a folding chair outside a community center. Jack had lived in the area for decades and had seen his fair share of wildfires. "This one's different," Jack told Barron, his voice hoarse from days of breathing in smoky air. "Fires don't burn like this." "Erratic, sure, but this was like a straight shot." When Barron asked about Sol Vista Holdings, Jack's demeanor changed. "Yeah, I've heard the name," he said warily. "They've been poking around here for months, buying up properties left and right. People didn't think much of it at first until the fire started." Jack's words sent a chill through Barron. He thanked the man and continued on his way, but similar stories began to emerge as he spoke with more residents. Several recalled seeing strange activity in the days leading up to the fires: low-flying drones, unmarked utility trucks, and even a few loud booms at odd hours of the night. He was driven to Thousand Oaks, a city where he met a woman named Elena who had been evacuated from her family's ranch. She showed him photos she'd taken on her phone. One in particular caught his eye immediately: a burn site with scorched earth in perfect circles, as if something had exploded in multiple places at once. Elena hesitated before handing over another photo. It was fuzzy but unmistakable, a drone hovering above her property, equipped with what looked like a small canister attached to its underside. "I tried reporting this to the authorities," she said, "but they said they were too overwhelmed to investigate. I don't think they cared." Barron felt a pit in his stomach as he pieced the clues together. Could drones have been used to start the fires? The idea seemed outlandish, yet not improbable, especially in light of the exactness of the ignition points. He resolved to dig deeper into Sol Vista Holdings, beginning with their leadership. That evening he went to the downtown Los Angeles Public Library and accessed corporate filings and news archives. The chief executive of Sol Vista Holdings was Victor Grayson, a rather low-key individual with connections to several other energy and real estate firms. Barron found lawsuits filed against Grayson for environmental damage, including unauthorized fracking and pollution of land. One article portrayed Grayson as a forceful advocate for redevelopment projects in areas prone to wildfires, often seeking lenient regulations to speed construction following fires. The more he learned, the more the picture sharpened. It wasn't a tragedy at all, it was an opportunity. If a fellow could clear significant areas quickly enough, they might rebuild for enormous profit. However, the growing feeling of being followed kept haunting Barron from gathering further information. He found the black SUV again parked close to the library's entrance earlier in the day, when he was arriving. And now, as he walked out to leave with a folder full of documents, it was once again seen lurking and slowly following him across the parking lot to his car. Barron was getting closer to the truth, but the more he discovered, the more his mission became a deadly game. Barron's heart was racing as he drove through the darkened streets of Los Angeles. The black SUV was still in his rearview mirror, though its headlights lit up what was ahead. He had to think quickly. Making a series of tight curves, he threaded his way through side streets and alleys until finally pulling into a jammed parking garage. He parked near the exit and ducked behind a pillar as the black SUV cruised past without stopping. Shaken but relieved, Barron clutched the folder of documents he had recently obtained from the library. The evidence gathered was damning, but he wasn't sure how to proceed. Who could he trust with this information? The authorities had already dismissed him, and sharing it online might only put him in more danger. Barron decided to reach out to someone with more resources, a journalist he remembered, a respected investigative reporter named Linda Moreno, known for exposing corruption and corporate malfeasance. He spent only a few minutes online, digging up her information, and composed an encrypted email, detailing what he had discovered, which he forwarded to her. The following morning, Linda consented to a meeting with Barron at a cafe in Pasadena. He explained his timeline of fires, suspicious purchases of land, and the probable Sol Vista Holdings involvement. "This is big," she said, using a serious tone. "If it's true what you're saying, this could get certain very powerful people into trouble." Linda agreed to assist Barron to double-check his findings and even suggested using her contacts to get more information about Sol Vista operations. But she still warned him, these are dangerous stories one can become an enemy for. "Be careful, Barron. You are in too deep. You are in too deep. When a loud crash outside interrupted them. Barron turned to see a car speeding away, its tires screeching as it rounded the corner. Linda's face grew pale. That's no coincidence, she said. We need to move. For the next few days, Linda and Barron worked tirelessly in order to discover even more evidence. Using her sources, Linda managed to get internal emails from Sol Vista that revealed plans to lobby for expedited rebuilding permits in fire-affected areas. One of the emails caught their attention in particular, a communication from Victor Grayson to his colleague, regarding accelerating the schedule and ensuring that sites are clear. The bottom line was obvious: there was someone setting the fires with the intent to force people out and clear up for redevelopment projects. The brazenness of the scheme made Barron and Linda both angry and determined to tell the story. But they did not go unnoticed. One evening, as Barron returned to his hotel, he found his room ransacked. Papers were scattered, drawers were open, and his laptop was missing. A single note lay on the desk: "Stop digging." Barron immediately called Linda, who urged him to stay with her until they could figure out their next move. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "But this just confirms we're onto something." Despite all of this, they continued to go ahead. Linda was now starting on a bombshell exposé tapestry to weave the gathered evidence together into a single and cohesive narrative. The story was ready to unveil in full Sol Vista's extent of corruption and community destruction, made deliberate and purposeful, merely for profit and gain. Barron felt now that time had almost run out. The walls were closing in. As much as Barron knew that exposing the truth would mean paying the price for those around him, he wasn't so sure he was ready to pay the price himself. On the day Linda's piece was set to run, Barron woke up to an alert on his burner phone. His encrypted email account with Linda had been compromised. Someone had accessed the drafts they were working on. Panicked, he called Linda, but the line went straight to voicemail. Unease crept over him as he grabbed his things and headed to her apartment. When Barron arrived, he found Linda's door slightly ajar. Inside, her workspace was in disarray. The walls that had been covered with notes and printouts about Sol Vista Holdings were stripped bare. Her laptop, camera, and notebooks were gone. A single sticky note was left to mark her desk, in bold, black letters across it: "You've been warned." Barron's heart felt like it raced a million times. Linda disappeared, and took most of their evidence with her. The other backup was already on Barron's encrypted cloud account, but there was no indication that it'd be safe forever. He took off from the apartment, clutched by the folder full of documents he kept on him constantly. Desperate for help, Barron decides to call his father. Barron had tried not to make a family affair. The situation now had gone over and above his head. "Dad, I need your help," said Barron with a trembling voice. "It's bigger than I thought." Donald Trump, who had connections and influence, listened intently as Barron explained the depth of what he had uncovered. "You've got guts, kid," his father finally said. "But you're right. This is dangerous. I'll make a few calls. But you need to keep your head down." And Barron, don't trust anyone. Meanwhile that evening, Barron received an encrypted message from somebody whose name showed up as no name. Titled Proof of Operation Phoenix, there was an attached file. Schematics regarding the drones themselves, emails in which top management at Sol Vista discussed payouts made to officials deemed complicit. The file contained telling, damning evidence, and it included a final threatening line: "Let this out of your hands, and you won't ever find daylight again." Barron knew he couldn't let this go undistributed. He sent the file to Linda's editor at the investigative outlet where she worked, accompanied by the piece they had developed before her disappearance. Within hours, the piece broke across all the major networks. The expose was a bald-faced, systematic destruction of an entire community to further financial objectives. It placed Sol Vista Holdings and high-ranking officials from California squarely into the crosshairs. It blew up with the public reaction. Protests erupted outside Sol Vista's headquarters, demanding justice for the families displaced by the fires. Federal authorities launched an investigation, and Victor Grayson's face became a symbol of greed and corruption. But the fallout wasn't cost-free. Barron's life was turned upside down as he became a target of scrutiny and media attention. His father's advisors warned him to stay out of the spotlight, but Barron refused to back down. "People need to know the truth," he told reporters in one of his few public appearances. Despite the threats and challenges, Barron's actions led to sweeping reforms in how land acquisitions were regulated in wildfire-prone areas. Sol Vista's assets were frozen, and several of its executives were indicted. Victor Grayson, on the other hand, went into hiding and is said to have fled the country to escape trial. Yet even as justice began to take its course, Barron could not forget the warning he had received. The shadow of those behind the operation loomed large, reminding him that revealing the truth usually has a very high price tag. Weeks went by after the exposé as the world witnessed the fallout of the scandal. News anchors explained how the investigations regarding Sol Vista Holdings were in place, followed FBI the arrest of complicit officials, as well as increasing efforts to revise wildfire prevention and response strategies. This was the first time that, for the common public, it was no more an uncontrollable natural disaster, but a conscious, calculated greed. Barron, however, kept himself under the radar. The media furor around his involvement in the case made him a celebrity overnight, but it also introduced threats and harassment. For security reasons, Barron's family planned for him to leave Los Angeles and be relocated to a safe location where he could await the situation getting calmer. Though Barron appreciated the efforts, he had to bear with everything he uncovered. He spent his days considering the lives torn apart by fire, families who had lost their homes, firefighters who took risks to enter burning buildings, and communities forever scarred. In the midst of tragedy, there was a glimpse of hope, a sense that had been built during the whole fire season by him and so many others, especially ordinary people whose efforts proved one could change everything, even at the worst odds. One afternoon, Barron received an email from a woman he had met at one of the shelters. Her family's home had been destroyed in the fires, but thanks to the public outcry and donations sparked by the exposé, they were able to rebuild. "Thank you for what you did," the email read. "You gave us hope when we thought we had none." The message reassured Barron that the power of truth was real. He had traversed a path of danger but, in the process, learned to stand for what is right at any cost. He realized that his actions did not only raise the level of outrage but inspired change. In the following months, new legislation was enacted to control land purchases in high-risk areas, ensuring greater oversight and accountability. A task force was also formed to look into the use of drones and other technologies in criminal activities. These measures wouldn't undo the damage that had been done, but they were a step toward preventing future tragedies. Barron's experience left a lasting impression on him. He directed all his energy towards activism, and his platform now became the means to voice out for environmental justice and corporate accountability. His life would never be the same after that, but a new purpose emerged in him. However, Barron knew that this was not his fight alone. "The truth matters," he said in an interview months later, "and it's up to all of us to make sure it comes to light." The story of the Los Angeles wildfires is a reminder of the power of courage and conviction. In a world where greed and corruption often go unchecked, it takes individuals willing to ask the hard questions to uncover the truth. If Barron's story inspired you, consider what you can do to make a difference in your community. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories that matter. Together, we can shine a light on the issues that deserve attention.